Hello, I'm David Roger, General Counsel for the Las Vegas Police Protective Association. I want to talk to you about a very important piece of legislation that PPA is going to be shepherding through the legislative process here within the coming months, and that's qualified immunity. Qualified immunity is very important to law enforcement. Whether you are a school police officer, a park ranger, a court marshal, highway patrol, any of the more than 10,000 law enforcement officers in the state of Nevada, this affects you. And so let's talk about qualified immunity, because we're going to be reaching out to people in the community to gain support for this bill. Qualified immunity simply means this. The qualified immunity means that unless a police officer has violated a clearly established law, the officer is entitled to immunity, which means the officer doesn't have to stand trial. It means that the officer's personal assets aren't in jeopardy. Conversely, if an officer does violate a clearly established law, that officer will face trial and have their personal assets at stake to satisfy a judgment if a jury rules against them. So the concept is very fair and very simple. If you violate a clearly established law, you go to trial. If you don't violate a clearly established law, that bright line rule, then you shouldn't have to sit through a trial. You shouldn't have to be financially exposed to a jury and to a plaintiff's lawyer. And so from my perspective, and understand this, I'm not speaking for Steve Grammis, the PPA, any police association. I don't speak for the executive board of PPA. I don't speak for the board of directors. This is David Roger, a career prosecutor, a 3-time elected district attorney speaking. And these are my views. And from my perspective, this is the hill to die for. And really, this is a shared responsibility. Everybody in the community has a stake in this legislation. And first and foremost, let's talk about the courts. The Nevada Supreme Court, in the Mack decision, could have recognized a common law right to qualified immunity. That's what the U.S. Supreme Court, under federal law and all the circuits, have recognized. It's a common law right. But instead, they passed, and they punted the issue to the legislature. And they said that it's up to the legislature to determine whether police officers receive qualified immunity. And so I say to the legislators, all of you come to PPA and the various law enforcement associations wanting our stamp of approval, wanting our endorsement. Well, this is the litmus test. You're either in or you're out. You either support law enforcement or you don't. That is harsh, but that is the reality, because this is important to the men and women of law enforcement. You know, as it is now, we have a difficult time convincing people to be police officers. And quite frankly, why should they? Why should young people want to be police officers as opposed to firefighters? Now recognize firefighters perform a very important function. They put their lives on the lines. But guess what? Firefighters don't get sued. And when they do, they get immunity for negligence. It is police officers who are scrutinized by the media, by the departments, by the courts. And it is their financial stake that is at issue here. And so let's talk about this shared responsibility, setting aside the legislature for a minute. You know, there will be a lot of lobbyists up in Carson City representing their clients. And quite frankly, from my perspective, everybody has a stake in this. Do we want a safe community, or do we want to be like San Francisco or Los Angeles, where progressives have taken over and accountability is no longer part of the criminal justice system? To the courts. You have a lobbyist up there pursuing your interest. This decision, this legislation affects your marshals. You have a stake in this. Will you be whispering in legislators' ears during this next session, telling them how important qualified immunity is to your employees? Nevada's sheriffs and chiefs. This is the association that represents every elected sheriff in the state of Nevada, represents the police chiefs. You have a stake in this as well. Because guess what? If you don't have police officers to go out on the streets, if you don't have aggressive police officers who are not afraid to respond to calls because they're concerned that they might get sued, you're not going to be able to do your job. To the Nevada District Attorneys Association, and there are some DAs in this state who are eager to prosecute cops, but guess what? You have a stake in this as well. Not only do you have investigators who are peace officers who need qualified immunity, but guess what? You need to have a safe community. Otherwise, you don't get reelected. And if you don't have cops making arrests, you might have the best prosecutors in the country, but if there's nothing to prosecute, you're not providing a safe community for your constituents. AARP and the seniors coalitions, this affects you as well. When someone is breaking into your house in the middle of the night, do you want to hear that a police officer is 5-10 miles away? Are you willing to rely on your volunteer security officers to respond and to protect you? This isn't meant to scare people, but it is intended to highlight for all of you that we all have a shared responsibility in this legislation. Chamber of Commerce, do you want businesses to flourish in our state? Or do you want to be like Los Angeles and San Francisco, where small business owners have bars on their windows and the metal gates that they lock shut at the end of the evening? Retailers, Walgreens, CVS, the shopping centers. You have a lobbyist up there. Do you want a safe community? Or do you want to have plastic locks and partitions on all of your goods? We saw in San Francisco where groups eluded these businesses, and Walgreens threatened to close their store. Many businesses in California have private security officers, armed security officers at their door. Does that sound inviting to the public? The Realtors Board, you have a lobbyist up there. Do you want Clark County or the rest of the state to be known as the most dangerous state in the country? Do you want people to want to move to this state and buy homes? The insurance industry, that should be self-explanatory. In San Francisco, people leave their windows rolled down in their cars, their trunks open, their glove boxes open, because otherwise people in broad daylight come and break windows in order to steal from the cars. You have a stake in this. Our friends with the Raiders and Golden Knights, Mark Davis, Bill Foley, can you rely on private security officers, unarmed security officers, to break up the drunks in the stands or provide a safe environment for fans? The hotels, we hit you up for a lot of things throughout the year and certainly throughout the legislative session. You are a sitting duck for increased taxes. Caesars, MGM, Treasure Island, Phil Ruffin, a good supporter of law enforcement. Stations Casinos, the Fertittas, good friends of law enforcement. We need your help as well. Because if visitors are afraid to visit the Strip, or locals are afraid to go to the local casinos because they might get knocked over the head. We need police officers. We need many police officers. We need a safe community, and we need your support. The downtown hotels, Circa, Derek Stevens, El Cortez, the Epstein family, strong supporters of law enforcement. We need your help to make sure that we can protect and make safe the downtown area. Look on the streets and look at the homelessness. Is that inviting for people? And then, of course, our brothers and sisters in the unions. You have a stake in this as well. I recognize that you have your own interest that you want to pursue at the legislature, but every one of your members live in our community, and they want to be safe as well. So from my perspective, and my perspective only, this really is an easy one. Qualified immunity doesn't mean that people can't sue police departments for negligence. What it does mean is that officers who were doing their very best under very difficult circumstances, who do not violate clearly established laws, shouldn't have to worry about their home or their family's finances. They should be able to go out and do their jobs. And for those officers who violate a clearly established law, this isn't going to protect them. This is an important piece of legislation. From my perspective, the most important. We have a drop program where it'll serve a certain segment of law enforcement to allow them to stay another several years. But from my perspective, the 10,000 plus law enforcement officers in the state of Nevada should have this protection. And by the way, it also affects federal agents who might be sued in state court. Thank you. I hope that when we call upon you during the next couple of months during the legislative session, you will step up and stand up for law enforcement, stand up for the safety of our community. If you have any questions, please contact me at droger@lvppa.com. Thank you.
111, 110.